The response to the broadcast was overwhelming. Many agreed it was poignant and emotive, extolling the simplicity of what a last day should mean. Many were skeptical regarding what could be achieved. Many simply thought it would be a gimmick, even a chance for a goodbye shag. But Billy's naturality in his performance won over the hearts of the nation, and beyond. It also meant all systems go for A&A, as the project was given funds that, while not unlimited, certainly meant that they could adapt their tech to provide a more realistic experience. In the wings, Jerry and Norman waited for their chance. Not all the subjects would be of any interest to them, but they had a short list of potential subjects who they hoped to groom with a view to them taking part. Two of the people they had most interest in them becoming involved were financially least likely to go anywhere near the project. Jerry could finance it, but that would run the risk of exposing their relationship with the subjects. The initial feeling was that they had become too invested in the project to try and rush things for now. So, they waited. They observed the processes as a trial run, mainly to view whether they would be caught or not, although getting caught would probably scupper the entire operation. Perhaps there was some sort of thrill to be had in believing they were always one step ahead. At times they did even wonder how it could be so simple, and every time they began to question the likelihood of them being able to snoop at will, their own egos dismissed the possibility of it being a trap. Still, at some point, and hopefully soon, a breakthrough would be needed. The information they had was also, aside from being useless, highly sensitive, and needed to be destroyed in the proper manner. That said, they felt it was important to keep their ears in. Plus, exiting and re-entering the system could prove problematic. They were managing to linger in the background like an awkward cousin at a wedding. Any moves forward could reveal them. As is always the case, the initial furore died down and people began to extol the virtues of the next great technological advancement. Perhaps in truth, what bored people with A last day was the rather dull happy endings they were always obtaining, as if the lack of disappointment meant it could not amass long-term appeal. A&A were not in the business of global appeal anyway. Their success was guaranteed through the contract issued by the government. Unless they started killing subjects at will, they would be assured renown in the eyes of their peers, vastly more important to them than that of the unwashed masses. Helen sat at her workstation and began to compose the message. Malcolm's blessing was one thing, but she knew he would not be prepared to put their accommodation in jeopardy for this or contemplate moving outside the 15MC. She deleted her effort. She thought when she first heard of the venture, that people would be moved by her tale. The more she read about the other participants, she detested the term subject. She realized her story was not the tearjerker she assumed. Tons of people had far more valid reasons to be placed on the project ahead of her. People die every day. It's not that out of the ordinary for someone not to have the chance to say goodbye. Her story would not rake in the viewers. Fires in laboratories were commonplace at that time, with scientists aiming to create zero power, a means of devising full emission-free power that in all truthfulness went too far, and instead of reaching the target set for the average temperature to rise, it ended falling by 3 degrees. This entailed a series of unforeseen issues that were remedied by endlessly burning the remaining fossil fuel stocks in order to maintain the balance around 1.5 degrees. Jerry and Norman had become caricatures of some dystopian drama where they try to save the world from their cave. They had gone so far off the radar that that itself was beginning to become something of a concern. Independently wealthy, but how? The world began to ask. The further they became detached from reality, the harder it was for them to participate to any degree in general human life. As Norman was actually more sociable than he had ever been before, the chances of him surpassing this level were scant. Jerry, becoming increasingly paranoid the more time the pair spent indoors and in each other's company, decided he would put himself out a bit. Jerry felt the best way to reinsert himself into society would be to go on a date. The world had changed beyond all recognition by 2053, but most people still required the company of another living and breathing human to get along, either well or badly. Jerry had tried the other options, synthetic robots that acted however their master or mistress programmed them to. For a while, they were the height of fashion, with well-to-do genuine couples going on double dates with their robot lovers. Despite this being seemingly an ideal solution for people with questionable body odor, poor social skills, excess baggage in the hip department, and an array of other shortfalls that meant finding someone to share this magic with was something of an arduous task. Human replacements tended to raise flags on moral acceptability scales. While these robots had no official status, there was a feeling that the way many people were treating them was somewhat off, to say the least. A large number fell into the realm of sex toys. There were arguments and counter-arguments that mistreating a robot was, however morally wrong, still vastly more favorable than abusing another human being. Yet, it led to a propagation of the master, and indeed mistress, culture, which inevitably distorted reality. As with everything in the world Jerry and Norman inhabited, the government put in place stringent controls to prevent technology getting out of hand, and on every street corner outside the 15MCs, there was somebody able to tweak with the machines to provide whatever the person paying could dream of. The theory, only in place for those without the means to bypass it, was that every purchase you made would be visible. You would have nothing to hide, and so why would it matter if the government knew when you purchased milk? up to 2036 obviously before it was prohibited and replaced with milk, which looked and tasted exactly the same but was in reality the discovery known as lactofeed waters. By the late 30s, the government were honest about their tracking. People hadn't realized that it had been in place for years, even 20 years previous, when people would laughably hunk around tablets and laptops. For many, the idea of a dream robot was the ultimate purchase. The tech was in place to change your robot like your parents may have changed their mobile phone case. You wanted a buxom blonde with a dirty streak, just a code away. Bored of that? Time for a Japanese waif with a servile side. System reset and away you go. That guy out of accounts? Send us a photo. And so on. There was a danger of a genuine blur between real human relationships and Robotland. Another issue was the crossover from legally sanctioned robots to chipped ones. Politicians and people in positions of authority would be assigned a robot as a personal assistant. These would come with a series of functions, amongst which was not hanky-panky. These were the first robots to be issued with a series of rights, automatically broadcasting their owner's feed when voices were raised over a certain level, or blows were detected. However, the creators, inevitably, installed a series of hidden features that would allow the owner, for a price, to access a series of offline modes that may make their robot slightly more fun on those grueling business trips. All models had a standard male, female, underperson or gender-free appearance, but depending on the skills of the person accessing the off-network robot, physical appearance could be changed at will. You were having bit of a retro night and Shakira came on, as if by magic. There she was before you, her hips not lying. You have had a tough day and want to take it out on someone? Shout, scream and kick 7 sorts of shite out of your robot to your heart's content. For a little extra, the prick will even bleed and bruise for you. Remember that pretty young thing in the civil service who gives you the snotty looks? Time to get her bent over and taught a lesson. All illegal, yet all unmonitored. Those in command made a big song and dance about the lawlessness of the areas outside 30 minutes. But the reality was it was there to where they turned to circumvent the laws they had enacted. Most people in the 30-minute plus zones just got on with things. Like in the song, I Saw a Man. He danced with his wife. All of this led to a landmark case when a senior politician, yes that one, believed he was more offline than he actually was, had his robot into the image of the female president of zone you may know as the United Kingdom. Whether his patcher simply was not up to the task or whether they had been paid leave a glitch in the system, the politician was seen by most of the world's population to slap her and force himself upon her against her will. This led to the enactment of the robot appropriation laws, which made it an offense to abuse a robot when in the guise of another person, the defense arguing that in real terms, he had raped the president. Glitches began to appear all over the place in the robot-owning community. There was no inquiry, no official report as to whether the patchers were taken on by the government to curtail these acts, or whether it was little more than a spate of good fortune. The government, always eager to eschew the morally irreprehensible, got the chance to clean up its image. Of course, this entailed a happy ending in which the use of robots for non-official purposes was actively curtailed and no more funny business was ever reported, or they found another way to cloak these activities. Either way, Jerry was certainly not in the band of users who could access such levels of luxury. That left him with Norman. You might be surprised to see that in many aspects, and that is not a flimsy vehicle so that the writer can get round not having the imagination to envisage a city 30 years into the future without spouting what a 7-year-old would have come out with if asked to say what life would be like in the future in the 1990s. Indeed, the early 40s did see the disappearance of stores, actual physical shopping and a multitude of other activities. The penchant to do everything on network was a craze that took hold without mercy. People spending their lives in their AI helmets, and even with the decimated population inhabiting the planet, people's longing to spend as little time as possible with other members of their race was a worrying development. This meant that as the 40s drew to a close, a resurgence of bars, restaurants, stores, parks and other amenities considered standard in the period of your parents' childhoods returned to the 15 MCs. Outside they had never left, and people were encouraged to interact again. This was not an attempt to increase the population. Females did not give birth in the 15 MCs anymore, though males could be treated to a dream pregnancy in which they made steps closer to understand the suffering their mothers and grandmothers were forced to endure, having a timestamp vagina installed so that they could give birth to a healthy 7-pound robot baby. This was part of the transensualening program that aimed to bring people closer. Jerry had not been in a bar in a decade. He had not cooked or cleaned in that time either, yet his abode was spotless, and his palate varied. He was surprised at how easy it was to organize this date at short notice. Merely a few phrases exchanged, and she said she would need 14 minutes. That worried him. His profile on the app would not have done great business in the early 20s, but as the person agreeing to the date could access his organ status profile and financial category, that may have swayed her decision. There could never be any amusing mishap during the meetup, as both geolocators would confirm the proper arrival of both parties. Sexual intercourse was not permitted until the completion of 3 4-star plus rated dates, so her thoughts were just to give him 3.5 whatever happened. Jerry, Tanya, that bit is stupid, isn't it? The locator has already told us, yet we feel the need to confirm the obvious. Christ, I hate small talk. Me too. Not a massive fan of big talk. Do you want to have the genuine produce or the retro AI menu? Would you mind terribly if we went retro? I have had a tough week and spinach with kale beer doesn't really cut it for me. Do you have glasses? Yeah, the new invisible ones. Swanky. I got these old things. Still should help you not get the horn. They perused the menu and chose from the post Weatherspoon's luxury selection. Jerry opted for the chicken Kiev, now renamed Chicken New Moscow, with jacket spud and mushy peas, while she had battered sausage, pucker pie chips and gravy. He had a pint of Guinness and she went for the Stella. So, you work in IT. Freelance projects. Very dull. And yourself? I am the president of Burundi. Laughs. Did I mention how bad my small talk was? I restructure AI musical pieces of the symphony orchestra. I didn't know that job existed. Well, basically we create new music from existing pieces by extracting the notes that are not there and reordering them in the spaces. Have you heard Mental Lions? That was me. Mental Lions. Doesn't ring a bell, I am afraid. I still listen to my parents' music. Dinosaurs like Ed and Taylor. You know that you don't need to listen to old music anymore. You can automatically make it normal through Agile Strucata. Yeah, but it has a quaint appeal. How is the grub? Not bad. The Stella is Moorish though. I thought it was Belgian. That's one of those jokes I have heard so much about, isn't it? I like you, Jerry. You are going to walk these 4 stars. Only 4? Back down to 3.5. Son. Second jokes are never as good. So have you had many? God, I hate myself for even asking the question. A waiter appeared and informed them that during their conversation they had already used 2 religious slurs and that a further one would result in a surcharge. Jesus wept. Jerry fell into fits of laughter, unlike the waiter, who added the 10% to their bill. Pudding? I haven't heard it called that for yonks. I haven't heard the word yonks in yonks. I share with my work colleague. He is socially inept. I'm going to have the apple crumble. Me too. This is terribly nice, Jerry, but I am afraid that even if you get your 4, we won't see each other again. I'd like to introduce you to someone. A man from the next table collected his devices and sat next to her, facing Jerry. She slid her device under his, checked the screen and thanked him, leaving while blowing a kiss to Jerry. You may know who I am, but I know who you are. I know who you are, Aubrey. Guess we weren't as clever at hiding a network as we might think. Huh? You did a pretty good job. Just left one door slightly ajar and that is how I found you. My first instinct was that you and Raymond were crudely trying to steal our idea. It's Norman, not Raymond. That's 2 late 20th century cinema references that have passed you by. Yet, it didn't make sense. Just spying on us. So I got to thinking, did you want something from me? Or Algernon? I could see no link to either of us other than jealousy perhaps. After all, you do refer to him in your internal comms as Algernon. Was this some harebrained conspiracy job to bring down the state? What on earth would make you go to so much trouble to follow our every move and do nothing? Then it finally clicked. Norman has changed. What changed him? The fire. That is when we discovered your, for want of a better word, hit list. Norman's husband was not the only major scientist to die in a freak fire during the Zero Power testing phase. Always fires. Always troublesome, if not impossible to explain. You knew there was a link, but you didn't know what it was and hoped that we would reveal it for you. But you got impatient. The people we were helping would never give you the answers you needed. Norman has gone behind your back to try and push more suitable subjects our way. The more digging we did, the more questions appeared without answers. Why have there been no fires since 2039 when the Zero Power Protocol was signed? Why were there so many in the late 20s and mid-30s? Why was the deal signed in 2039 though all experimentation stopped in 2036 and the product was deemed launch ready? If you are beginning to experience a tingling sensation throughout your body as you believe this is the point where I tell you that you were right and here are all the answers, then I fear you shall leave here with a further disappointment. Whatever happened is so far locked away that only those who were taken can possibly answer the questions. This is where people like your Helen come in. I would not say she is mine. Well, we are about to launch a lottery-style draw for applicants who cannot afford the program, and using your skill and judgment, guess who will be the first 2 winners? Helen and Norman's husband. Check out the big brain. Oh, forget it. Yes, then at least one more from your list. My belief is that one of them cannot reveal the truth alone, but that each of them will have a keyword that will unlock the hidden files. What if you are wrong? You really think we would be having this conversation if I thought I might be wrong? If I am, then I guess you will go to prison. Anyway, finish your apple crumble. It will be cold. We will be in touch. Do not alter anything. Keep going as is. Your access channel has had a newer cloak added so you will be privy to absolutely everything. This means that if you decide to get involved in any funny business, it will be the end of you. This is not a Hardman spiel. This goes beyond me. It goes beyond everyone. Try to get some good out of this. Aubrey left and Jerry placed his finger on the spin sensor to pay but there was nothing owing. His device projected in the open space in front of him with the news of a notification. It just said goodwill allocation. As he left the establishment, pondering whether the evening could have gone any better, his date was waiting for him outside, with a real can of Stella and Guinness, activating her boozer cloak and suggesting he follow her. Helen was barely watching the view station when she caught the ad for the last day lottery. She was sure these things were fixed and when offered, decided that it was not worth bothering with. To Malcolm's bemusement, you are willing to leave us homeless but won't spend a few block tokens on a ticket that could get you what you want for free. I don't get you sometimes. You've made that patently clear. Helen stormed out the room. There had been a lot of that. Malcolm had bought a ticket though. He had never won anything in his life, so it would be typical for him to start now with something he had absolutely no desire to have. The draw was on Saturday. Fucking, what year is it? Not 1995. Of all years. Go on then. Shall I put the draw on? What for? Oh, you never know. He poured the vacuum but was not convinced by the glasses, transferring the liquid to temporary air hold. They swapped them for their finest crystal rework. He sat next to her on the sofa and passed her the drink, issuing the command for the view station to commence its broadcast. A presenter appeared on the screen in mid-speech. One lucky person could get their very own A last day experience for free. Everybody would love to spend a last day with a loved one, or someone not so loved. He gave a cheesy wink to the camera and the audience laughed. Remember when TV was good? She asked. Not in my lifetime. Gone were the days of having a piece of paper by your side and marking off the numbers. Entrants were electronically informed instantly. Malcolm had used her Finanska to pay for the ticket, figuring, if she won, he won. If she didn't, she would probably never realize. We have a winner. Located in 15MC number 28. Helen looked at Malcolm. Great, some neighbor has only gone and won it. Her contact station began to flash. Bloody work at this time of night. She went to F network but saw that the notification was not from work, but from A last day. You wonderful cunt. I'll take that as a compliment. The prep for the project was exhausting. Even Malcolm was interviewed at length, despite never having met the man and only hearing her version of his life. A&A had already begun the process on Norman and the profile was nearing completion. The third subject was involved in an actual fire in Canada and had survived but had suffered from amnesia ever since. The hope was that being back with her colleagues again would help her remember. Monitoring of the project had fallen somewhat by the wayside. It was not deemed priority any longer by the government, who saw it as a largely pointless money spinner. A&A took advantage of this to run two separate subjects side by side, but only one was 100% official. The other, while it could never be done off network, would be assumed as an overlap to the ongoing project, as conveniently, they were experiencing unexpected scenarios, all created by Aubrey, that suggested there may still be some inconsistencies. This meant that while a granddad from what you might call Norfolk spent some time with his daughter who died of leukemia, almost unfathomable in our times, a scientist from Ottawa sat in the other chair. She was regressed to her place of work on the day before the fire. Do you recognize this woman? No, but it's me. Not a promising start. The remainder of her colleagues were introduced one by one, each one giving their names and positions. Do you know these people? No, but they are my ex-colleagues. What happened to them? I don't know. Do you remember the fire? What fire? The fire in the lab? No, but I remember the fire. Her psychologist mentioned that she had never got this far with her. They mingled in the lab and moved over to the coffee machine. This was quite an easy assignment for A&A as they all had extensive wiki pages and had appeared on television multiple times. This fire was close to the end of the spate. Helen's husband died in one of the first fires. The group chatted away and suddenly the scientist, Sarah, began acting like she was running the show. This would make sense as she was the head scientist. This would not make sense as she could not recall this. Until now. So, you are saying 2 weeks? I'm not the head of this project, but I would stick my neck out, or the PL's neck and say maximum 3. Zero power could well be a reality a good few years before the proposed treaty date. I guess it's time to make a call and move things forward. Sarah, visibly moved in her chair, felt a million memories come back all at once. Algernon, linking Jerry and Norman, saw a chance. Sarah, with your permission, we would like to insert an unreliable memory. A memory you may have had or may have forgotten. Perhaps nothing happened in this way, and this will be a pointless shift of events. Are you willing to try something new? Very much so. In fact, I can feel a memory returning. I can smell smoke. Excellent. We will move forward to the time of the fire. You have to give your consent to proceed. You will see your colleagues die, if the image can be attained. Our hope is, you will see something else. Hook me up. The laboratories is the scene of celebration. The walls are adorned with the words "We did IT." Simple but effective. Sarah sips champagne from a plastic cup while a colleague passes round a bag of crisps. It'll be fucking flutes when the Nobel Prize comes in. Deserved. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. The fact that the 14 million people who live in Britarex will never have to worry about heating bills is more than enough reward for me. You say that. There was laughter which was interrupted by a flash. For a moment the electricity goes off and they are in darkness. When the emergency lighting kicks in, the floor is engulfed in smoke. But it is not smoke. It is fumes. Sarah shouts to everyone to run for cover and instinctively empties her paper cup and uses it as a makeshift face mask. She knows that the others are flitting in and out of consciousness and sees 3 men in wearing protective gear. She manages to make her way to a ventilation grill, struggling to take in some air. She feels the air in her lungs sting against the venom of the fumes but continues to crawl, forcing her breath out like it was her last. They remove the data station and perform a city-wipe on all active memory in the center. They place a series of charges and leave. Sarah makes her way to the other side of the grill and finds a loose wall tile. She pushes her way through and is in a duct. She knows the charges will set fire to the place, and if the flames reach her, there will be no escape. With the energy she can muster, she makes her way to the other end. Feeling the heat coming towards her, she turned her head and could see flames. She was on the other side. With strength she did not know had. She forced through the other side and fell in a rather unladylike heap onto the floor. The fall made a noise which alerted the attention of the ne'er-do-wells, who made haste to finish her. The chief malefactor told them to hold back. Finish her off. Boss, don't be so classless. How do we explain that? The ones inside were part of the fire. This one got away. What do you suggest? Execute an amnesia implant. Done. Boss. Sarah has something resembling a stapler placed to her head and she falls unconscious. Try not to freeze to death, darling. They all laugh heartily as they depart the scene. Sarah is awake on the set with a glazed look on her face. This is the first step of the process. You will get your recognition. We are onto them, but it will take time. This has gone better than we could ever imagine. However, we cannot get ahead of ourselves. We know things, but we cannot prove things. Our next subject will be able to help us in this regard. Aubrey will deprogram your amnesia implant, but I would reiterate the need for you to remain silent on this matter for the time being. I can't even remember where I went today. Sarah smiled and removed the guard, leaving the premises with her fingers crossed. Norman retinized the documentation and steadied himself to take his place. After all these years, he would finally see Bobby again, the love of his life and the reason he lived so close to death now. What had begun as a mere farewell among lovers, had now become something more sinister and potentially hazardous. The discovery with Sarah's time as subject had been expanded upon with a further 2 regressions that proved every time a laboratories was close to the completion of Zero Power, there would be an incident that resulted in widespread loss of life. Data and amnesia. In theory, everything was in GovCloud, but conveniently, both the fires and the hacking were purported to be the endeavors of Never Zero, a terrorist group devoted to the continuance of the use of fossil fuels as they believed the world, basically the planet's own core, replenished these fuels when they were extracted, forming part of something akin to a water cycle. If it were not extracted, then the planet would drown from the inside. An interesting theory that was in fact the work of a fictitious governmental department, set the task of creating a scapegoat. Never Zero's aims may have seemed foolhardy, but that did not stop the multitudes from jumping on the bandwagon and showing vehement support for these actions. A&A's last days had proven that the group was comprised of actors, and these were not even entrusted with the sabotage. One who died in a supposed getaway was revisited, and thanks to a series of recordings that were unearthed, revealed that he had been removed as he planned to go public with the truth. He was outed as the head of the group and the kill seen as a splendid coup for the government. By this time, they were almost close to the date the protocol would be signed and decided it would not be overly terrible for Never Zero to be discontinued. Norman did not have doubts about himself. Rather, he was more concerned about what he would discover from Bobby. He had always assumed he was a consummate professional, but there was a major cover-up in place, not just involving Zero Power. There were also questions being raised now on the major epidemics that left the territory you know as the UK with a population of 14 million by 2053. The maximum population levels for the 15 MCs were set at 250,000, though most had a lot less. Each city was entitled to recruit 15% of its population for menial tasks who were from the 30-minute regions. Anything less pleasant or unsavory would be performed by the horrors, whose social status was beneath that of the robots. Norman asked for a moment with Jerry, he himself knowing that anything spoken in this environment would be akin to just sticking it on whatever the equivalent was for the period of BBC One. I'm not sure I want to go through with this. Our task here is not martyrdom for Bobby. It has gone beyond that now. You have to accept the outcome. It could still be good. If he was guilty or at the top of the scale, it is unlikely that he would have been bumped off. They say their own. They also remove problems. In that case, you will know he died for his beliefs. Is there anything nobler? Living for them? I'm sure if he had been given the chance he would have loved to. Please don't be wrong. Tell them to come back in. Norman was reassured by Aubrey, who had actually made the gesture to half comms for that minute. Everything was ready for Norman to spend his last day with Bobby. The first thing he did was to go off script. I need to know how involved you were. Did you sell out? Were you responsible for all those deaths? Skipping the introductions. I see. Nice to see you would have gone down well, even under these circumstances. Remember that album we used to listen to? Stop making sense. When David Byrne comes out and says, I got a tape I want to play. Well, I got a video I want to play. To you. I can't believe you never found this? Sometimes you look everywhere except where you should be looking. Bobby sits in office in what appears to be a government facility. He looks uncomfortable and is clearly eager to get out of there sharpish. A man in a general's uniform enters. You have made some rather impressive progress. Some would say rather ahead of schedule. Schedules are in place for a reason, and yet you boffins get all invested in these things and start reinventing the wheel. Here's what you are going to do. You are going to become an employee of this division and set about throwing spanners in the works. Destroy my life's work? Why would I do that? Because you are instructed to do so, as a loyal subject. I am only loyal to science. Well, that will look fine and dandy on your e-tomb. I don't think you want any of this on your conscience. We have no idea what you see in him, but life would be a lot lonelier without that freak husband of yours. Oh, threats. How retro. You do realize that there are hundreds of scientists working towards this? If you stop me, someone else will get there in days. How are you going to stop all of us? We have our ways. Explain to me how Zero Power does not benefit everybody. Explain to me how you got a PhD while being a naive fool. You will follow instructions. In the next shot, Bobby is seen in a 75-minute region, his geolocator stating his position. Despite most people viewing the video never having seen one of these regions, their presuppositions proved well off the mark as it seemed an agreeable rural setting. In a barn, Bobby addressed two masked men. Despite being so far away from civilization, the conversation was encoded so that anybody listening in would be unable to decipher its content. Yet when Bobby clicked his finger, the participants began to communicate in English. So, you can activate the server from here to access the database. Of course, we have been through this. The cloak will make it untraceable. This is the only copy. With this, all these regions will be able to activate Zero Power. Once the protocol is signed, there will be no need to maintain the charade. But in the meantime, you need to use grid power, albeit sparingly. The reason they want the Zero Power program halted is because they know exactly how much fossil fuel is left. We will not get to 2040, but if we stop now, their pensions will be out the window. They plan to take every last drop and milk it for as much as they can, creating power crises to push prices up. Make copies. Install them under the cloak in all your servers. Spread the word. You have spent your last cold winter. If they find out about this, they will kill you. If I don't do it, I will kill myself. Convincing. Have a safe journey back. If I get away with it, I could see myself out here. How far is the nearest store? Less than 15 minutes. They all laughed. Bobby was next seen in his office, deleting the code for Zero Power as General Rogers Nelson looked on. I'm glad you have seen sense. I didn't really have much of an option. People outside the 15 MCs will freeze to death this winter and that could be avoided. Anyone out there is not worth saving. We have managed to get the population down to 14 million, but there could still be more culls to improve efficiency. A very humanistic approach. Using science to kill people. What an epitaph. Your problem is caring for people who give you nothing in return. After 6 words you could have stopped. Well, you are as much a part of this as anyone. You should be proud. You have no fucking idea. The general left the room to Mint News, the head of the government. What nobody in the laboratories knew but that thanks to the technology on hand now could be seen, was the general receiving the instruction to proceed as planned. Aubrey performed as National Strom insertion that would mark the end of the general's career. Now they were after the very top brass. Norman enjoyed the rest of the day before Bobby was forced to return to the fire that would take him. He was a hero. It would seem so. I enjoyed your dishearteningly pessimistic take on things. They have had Zero Power years before us and kept it under wraps. Thanks to Bobby. Thanks to Bobby. A&A gave them the minute they deserved, but no more time. Their cloak may not survive a bombardment from official government facilities. Should someone on the inside take a last swipe at saving the regime, Helen had to be brought in ASAP. A vehicle was sent for her despite her claiming she was not ready. For the first time, they lowered the cloak so that anybody could tune into their conversations. For months they had placed all their energies in hiding everything. Now, the more the merrier. You will get your day. We just need you to do one thing first. This is almost over. Brian was not an ordinary scientist. He laid the foundations for Zero Power, but he did so too soon. That was his downfall. That and publishing, which as any good scientist knows, is part and parcel of the job. They killed him for his work. But you know who stole the work? The very man who swept to power on the promise of providing Zero Power before the proposed protocol date. How was he so sure? He had the science. How could nobody scupper his plans? He just eliminated them. That led to a series of fires. Every time someone got close, flames. We have managed to enhance the technology so that if you can get Brian to simply touch his workstation, the contents can be accessed showing all movements before the fire. If we can see the Zero Power data being extracted then destroyed, then half of our government could be in prison by Sunday. Kinda convenient. Almost as if it's been crowbarred in to reach a satisfactory conclusion. Well, modern technology is a bit like that. You may find it difficult to comprehend with older eyes, but these things move so quickly these days. I can shift into actor mode. Helen donned the helmet. Would it be the last time anyone was involved in a last day? Certainly. Things would change once all of their information became fully public. Petrified civil servants were busy trying to cloak the operation as swiftly as possible, though many realized the damage had been done. What had been leaked was bad enough. They knew what they were holding in reserve could spell the end of pretty much society as it stood. Helen ran towards Brian and forced herself upon him in a passionate embrace. She engineered him so that he was pushed against the workstation. A simple brush would have been enough, but Helen was well into character and pinned him down for a good minute. Subtle, Algernon thought as Malcolm covered his eyes. Aubrey gestured to her that they had enough data and that the rest of their day could be spent off network. They explained that literally anything could happen from this point onwards and perhaps even the system would crash. Helen did not for 1 minute consider that the eyes that had followed her along every step of her voyage so far being focused on other matters would mean that she would have free rein to have one last encounter with Brian. Now as she looked at him, she realized how much her Malcolm was. She also wondered why she had allowed herself to become so obsessed with this farewell and realized that it was never about her actually saying goodbye to rid herself of any guilt. It was more that she was following social conventions that made her believe it was the right thing to do. She enjoyed this realization and allowed herself to fall into this moment with Brian. In the past, he had seemed fascinating. She cursed the technology on hand that made him so lifelike, so irritably lifelike that she could easily see why she had spent so much time fretting about fixing something that was clearly very broken. After a few awkward moments, there was silence. She knew the onus was on her to get some sort of conversation going. As usual, you did good work in the lab. Well, neither of us did our best work outside the workplace. What do you think would have happened if there had been no fire? I mean, well, for a long time there was no fire, then there was a fire, and then there was no more. I guess more lack of fire would only have meant you didn't die. I guess. But you were trying to get us back together. But I was trying to convince myself it was worth a chance. Then I felt guilty, or that everybody was watching me. I don't know. I kinda like the anniversary meals, the search for the ingredients and the like. It was daft, but I admit I enjoyed it more when it coincided with a row with Malcolm, which towards the end, it always did. I'm glad we didn't remortgage the house for this. Me too. Do you actually feel like you are here? I mean, can you see me as I am? Or do you see me as a 28-year-old still? Can you feel anything? I'm not here. That was always the problem. I am a recreation of an unsatisfactory past. You have done well. I would have liked to live, but I did my bit. Hopefully history will be kind to me from now on. I'll make sure it is. Go and see Malcolm. Have a nice evening together. Our work is done here. I can clean up. It feels wrong to just leave you, though. It's been 30 years. The good thing is that what you thought this was for was not the real aim behind the venture. Listen to those sirens. They are not coming for us. Bye Helen. Bye, Brian. Over the next few days, the walls of the 15-minute cities started to come down as masquerade after masquerade was revealed. There was jubilation and anger at the same time. In a world in which so much technology was on hand to make people's lives easier, they had all lost track of what was truly important and allowed for underhand tomfoolery to become the norm. Helen rushed over to Malcolm and they made their way out without a proper goodbye to Brian or to anyone. They had time to make up. Helen took the flowers to Brian's final resting place. Not a grave as such. Virtual cemeteries were much more popular and pleasing to the eye. But Brian had his spot and she was a regular visitor with the flowers. In her quaint 20s manner. In the old days, it just bore his name and deepened it. Now it proudly bore the legend's Aeropower Innovator, which pleased her. Two old ladies went past as she placed the flowers and she heard one of them say they are building a statue to him in the town. She looked towards Malcolm, both in the distance and in the future at the same time, and moved towards him.